one of the cornerstones of any business is supply and demand. And we've encountered a variety of situations when it comes to supply and demand, where we have an excess of supply with little demand, or where we have little supply with extreme demand. And we have yet to encounter one that's perfectly balanced. And as everything goes in life, nothing is ever perfect. Today, we want to talk about supply and demand because it's essentially the most important thing that is involved in any business. Austin, give us a little rundown of what supply and demand is and pave the way for this podcast, if you wouldn't mind.
I will do my best, which is usually pretty good.
Humbly so.
Yeah, so supply and demand. This is something that we've encountered and you will encounter from the inception of your business and whatever you want to start. How much do people need the shit that you have? How much are they willing to pay for it? How much are they willing to go through to get it? And you have to center, well, not necessarily you have to, but it would be wise if you centered your business around something where you know that you have a demand for something. So, the supply. How much of the shit is there? How much of the shit do you have? Where are, people able to get this particular thing? Can they get it from you? Can they get it from Jose? Can they get it from me? All that. How much of that is there, right? I could have in my, possession $5, and nobody else has $5 but you, me, and Jose, right? There's the supply. We got the supply for that $5 or for those $5, right? It's $15 in total. The demand, since there's no money elsewhere, we're the only people with money, is going to be very high because nobody else has the shit. So if you're in a market where maybe not too many people can have access to this particular supply of something, or it's in high demand because there's not a lot of it, that would be wise because people will do almost anything and everything to get what you have. Now, imagine if I had that same $5, you had that same $5, and Jose had that same $5 I just talked about in the previous example. And I'm sorry, I'm going through allergies right now. Imagine if you all had that same $5, right? But everybody else had $20 in their pocket. They started off with, they came into the world with $20, everybody. And no matter what, you can't get any lower than that $20. We just so happen to just have $5. There's not going to be a lot of demand for our $5. Why? Because everybody else has money. They have more money. So what's the point of me taking a little measly $5, right? So there's not going to be a lot of demand. So the supply here doesn't mean as much. So like Jose said, it's a fine balance between the two, because if you go into a situation and the supply doesn't meet the demand or is lower than the demand, then that could be horrible. But if you also have something where, the demand is less than the supply, that also could be bad. You're fucked both ways. So you gotta have a good kind of balance between a supply and demand. And we've experienced shit on both ends, actually. And Jose, do you want to tell them a little bit about how we've experienced either too little supply and high demand, or also too high or too little of demand and too much supply?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the monologue. I think that was more of a story, actually, or dialogue than monologue, because monologue is more personal. Now, I want to actually make the distinction between two categories within this discussion when it comes to demand, because I think it's relevant to answer your question. I think that there's two categories that you can separate supply and demand to. There's an existing demand, and then there's a manufactured demand. Now, an existing demand, and this is my favorite reference to the day, to the end of days, the end of time. If you are in a desert and you're famished, you're starving, you're thirsty, you haven't had a drink of water in 3 days, the demand for water is very high. And when the supply is there, you better believe that it's going to go fast because the demand is so high. It's such a coveted resource. It's such a crucial and important resources, which why I would categorize this as an existing demand. And then there's also manufactured demands. Now, certain inventions throughout time weren't things that were necessarily thought of as essential when they were created. And then later, we've become dependent on them, which means those demands were manufactured. A perfect example is a telephone. That was not an essential component of human society. The airplane, the light bulb, all of these things, what they did was manufacture a demand. This demand was not existing, but what these products did was they solved a problem that people were unaware of, and they manufactured their own demand. Now, to answer your question, we've encountered both scenarios where supply is high and demand is low, or where supply is low and demand is high. In the past, we've entered very competitive markets and we learned the hard way that demand will fluctuate based on the competition. Supply was very, very high, but the demand is relatively baseline. So in comparison to the supply, the demand was dwarfed, which means we were in a very, very cutthroat and competitive environment. And if you want to compete in that, you're more than welcome to, but understand that your upfront investment in resources, in marketing, in the quality of your product is going to be a lot higher than when the demand is higher than the supply, because you're fighting an uphill battle. Now, the other scenario, which we're currently encountering, is having a high demand and a low supply. This is an awesome scenario. However, it's equally as stressful, if not more stressful, because rather than not finding customers or clients, you have an abundance of customer and clients that you don't want to let down. This has less friction and less energy because you're coming to a market, whether your product is quality or not, there's a high demand. Now, obviously, if you have a higher quality product, you're fulfilling your customers better. That's desirable, always. But when you encounter this scenario, it now becomes, all right, there's a potential for explosive growth, but tread with caution. Why? Because you don't know how long that growth is going to last. One of the things that Austin and I talked about is how do we not overshoot or overestimate so that 3-4 months down the line, we're not stuck with a massive inventory that we can't move. So even though it's great, don't get caught up in the whirlwind. It's a trap. However, find a field or find a business or find an occupation where the supply is lower than the demand. I highly recommend it. And us, for one, we talked about this today. It's almost like it feels too easy.
And we talked about this before. Some of the reason why I feel like it feels too easy, and I think this might have to be its own podcast, is because I personally think that we are in a somewhat of a flow state where you put in the work for so long, you put in the hours for so long that it kind of feels normal to you. So whenever you do something that a year ago might have been extremely difficult to do, it kind of feels like a layup at this point. So for other people, it might seem like, what the fuck did y'all just do? Y'all just did all that in a month. But for us, it's like, okay, yeah, now we did that. What's the next thing? So I think that kind of contributes to that. But one of the things that I did want to kind of emphasize here when it comes to making sure that the supply is not making sure, but in a scenario where the supply is less than the demand, I think you want to take advantage of that particular situation and continue to take advantage of high demand and leverage high demand. And there are different ways that you can do this. One way in particular, I think, is very beneficial to some, but not to others, is the use of exclusivity and scarcity. So everybody knows brands like, and these are brands that we've been seeing a lot of actually. Everybody knows brands like Lamborghini, McLaren, let's just say here, Pagani, XYZ, right? So you know those brands. Those brands are, I believe, billion-dollar companies, if I'm not mistaken, right? How do they generate that much money if they only have a limited amount of vehicles that they sell in a year? I don't know if many people knew that, but let's just say, for instance, right, a Lamborghini Urus.
Yes.
They could only make 500 or like 1,000 in general the whole year, right? To some people that may sound like a lot, but when you're talking about the whole entire world and everybody who can afford a Lamborghini Urus is probably way less than the amount of people that can afford it and want it. So you know what that does? That makes everybody fight to try to get that shit, which spikes, which means that there's an increase in demand because there's not enough supply. Leveraging that scarcity is how certain companies like these super wealthy companies that have cars or products that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people are like, how the hell do they keep, making these cars and people keep buying them? It's because there's such a low number of them and everybody's fighting to get it. And even when you do that, it's like with real estate sometimes. When you're fighting to get something that everybody else wants, sometimes what that does is that boosts the price of that particular item because someone's willing to pay more than someone else to try to get it, which makes that product even more pricey, which makes you more money. So if there's a way to leverage that demand, you have to take advantage of, exclusivity, scarcity, and then you also have to do certain things like, hey, who can I partner with to blow this shit up? So we've had recent discussions with people that have certain networks, right? We can only get so far ourselves, going door to door to bar, golf club to golf club, right? But what has helped us, and it's been true today, even this fucking morning, we wake up to a text basically, well, is it wake up or did that shit happen yesterday? I don't even remember. Anyway, in the last 24 hours, somebody texted our phone and said, hey, here's the cigar, that I gave to someone else. They tried it and they said they loved it.
It was last night.
Is there any way that you can get us more of that cigar or get him more of that cigar? And actually, I'm going to need some of it myself. So I say that to say, when you partner with certain people or when you have certain relationships with certain people, if your product is good enough, it markets itself damn near. Because they have a platform or they have a network where they can pass out or raise the awareness of your particular brand. And you see this now with social media marketing and social media influencer marketing. People will just are willing to pay thousands of dollars to get their product into the hands of somebody who is well known, has a lot of followers, X, Y, and Z, because they have the platform. So if they have the platform and they have the followers and everybody just loves to like their posts and buy what they buy, wear what they wear, drink what they drink, you would be smart of you to say, hey, look, I have some money. Here's $10,000. Here's a picture, take a picture of you drinking my product. Take a picture of you eating my product. Take a picture of you wearing my product. And because you did that, even though you spent $10,000, right? When they do that, they post it, it goes out to millions of people potentially. Because say they have millions of followers, their followers see it. And if their page is public, even their non-followers see it if they show up on their suggested feed or whatnot. So you could potentially they could potentially see millions and millions of people that are looking at their posts of them wearing, eating, or drinking whatever your product is. Now, that is potentially, let's just say if it's even like 1% of that. What's that, 10,000 or some shit? Mm-hmm. That's 10,000 fucking people that say, hey, I'll buy your shit. Really? 10,000 more people that say, I'll buy your shit. Now, say those 10,000 people were buying a product that was $50. Really? That's $500,000 that got to you just like that, and that was 1% of the people that saw your fucking post or saw that post.
Just imagine if you can convert more.
You just made $500,000 off of 1%. Now, if you do trial and error, you experiment a little bit, you figure out what worked and didn't work, you can get that 1% to 10%. That 500,000 goes to 5 million, if I'm not mistaken. So you see the importance of leveraging the demand and realizing the certain tips and tricks in order to boost the demand. That, in my opinion, if you utilize it and know what those tips and tricks are, even if you have to pay, because you have to pay to play, especially when you get to this level of shit, it would be very beneficial for you to go and do that and leverage that demand. Because if you increase that demand, then you can put some of the money back into what you've received to increase the supply. And when you increase the supply in certain instances, it helps you to kind of battle and be prepared for the tough times. Jose, can you tell them a little bit about kind of being prepared with your supply for increased volume, increased demand? Because that is something that we are actually experiencing right now. And we knew that we would encounter it and we knew that we would have to utilize it, but we didn't think it would happen this fast.
You have to have a cushion, and you also have to have a variety of venues by which to fulfill your orders, your customers, or increase your volume and capacity, which is what we discussed this morning with a wonderful said individual. If you can predict or you can outline what your bread and butter is, and your bread and butter, for those who are unaware, is essentially where you make the majority of your money. That could be 1,000 boxes or 1,000 units of whatever you're selling. That's guaranteed sales every single month.
Exactly. Guaranteed, more consistent than the rest.
Correct. And then from there, you predict a degree of variability. So you have to comfortably select a number above your baseline where ordering that or producing that or employing that number of individuals, you can afford all of that to not be sold, to not be moved, or to not be used. But also that number allows you to flex within reason upwards to meet any trend or growth or potential in your growth. And the reason why you don't want to overshoot this, and you can overshoot it by a little bit, that's fine, but you don't want to grossly overshoot this and be overly optimistic, is because that can hurt you. One bad decision can cause everything to crumble. A perfect example of this is all of the tech companies during the pandemic. They just grew and grew and grew and grew and hired and hired and hired and hired. And I think we all know how that ended. It ended in flames, tears, chaos, and a lot of people took their lives. And people are still trying to find employment to this day. And I'll give you a perfect example. You know what major company did not deal with almost virtually any fallout from this tech hiring frenzy, we'll call it? Apple. Why? Because they prepared accordingly. They didn't grow and hire as rapidly as other companies. And therefore, when everybody's like, oh, we're getting fired, we're getting laid off, they look at their friends at Apple and they're like, wow, I wish I worked for Apple.
That's a very good point. And something that you, or kind of to give people a point that I want them to recognize and realize. Because some people may say, why is it bad to have more than what people need at that moment? Because if demand fluctuates, wouldn't it be good to have, the more the merrier? So when you have all of that stuff, whether it's good times or bad times, you can be good. Here's where it can get tricky. It depends on what business you are in. Because sometimes if you oversupply or if you get too much of something than what you need for that current moment, it can actually cost you money. Because say, let's use this for example. You get too much, ice cream. You're an ice cream business, right?
There's no such thing, Austin.
Yeah, right.
Too much ice cream.
Ask Amy's Ice Cream on, not gonna tell you where, but you could see us. But Amy's Ice Cream somewhere, they know that there's never too much ice cream when it comes to us. But say you have an ice cream business, right? You have the normal shipment of ice cream that you normally get around that time. But for some reason they make a mistake and they triple it. Now you have to get all of that ice cream. One, I don't know if they refunded you or kind of not allowed you to pay that, but say they did, you paid for that extra. Then once it gets there, you don't have enough place to store it. If you don't have enough room to store it, you could try to make some room and whatnot, but then you not properly being able to store it because it's too much. Some of the ice cream may melt. That's product that you could have had and could have used and could have sold that's ruined now. So you have to throw that shit out. Then at that point, again, product that you could have had and could have used and could have sold becomes trash, which means you are losing money. That however much you're selling a pint of fucking ice cream, you're no longer getting that from that because it went bad because you oversupplied. You didn't have the space to supply it. You didn't have who knows, you may not have had the enough electricity to be able to supply it not supply it, but keep it and make sure that it's at the right temperature and all of that stuff. So it might have been too much electricity to keep that at that, particular, volume that you had. So you might have to get rid of it. There are a lot of things that could happen to where if you over supplied something or if you over stored something, it could lead to problems. So when you get into particular businesses, you have to realize this and figure out, okay, how much is too much for me? What's the perfect spot for me as far as storing something? Because for us in our business, it could be bad if we had too many cigars because at this particular time and place, we don't have the room to store, say, if we got 3 fucking times the amount of cigars that we thought we were going to get, where the fuck are we going to put it? And even if we found a place to put it, it could not be situated properly for our product. So, so there's a lot of things that you have to think about when it comes to supply and making sure that you have the right amount of supply. Because if you don't have that perfect point or perfect supply, amount like people have said or like Jose have said, you could be fucked. You know what I'm saying? So...
And I think one of the things that I want to bring back a little bit is the exclusivity of a product that you mentioned earlier. I have here written that adding a level of exclusivity can help boost your demand, but this is only possible if you have a ridiculously quality brand and name.
Very true.
So Rolex, demand is absolutely bonkers, but the quality of the vehicle is also ridiculously amazing. Rolexes. Yeah, my bad. I meant to say Rolls Royce. For the record. Any brand really, and this doesn't fall for all of them. Sometimes, like for example, Balenciaga doesn't necessarily have the highest quality. Clothes, I feel like clothes is a little off. Clothes is more like brand than quality.
Correct.
Brand name. So that's why I said quality and name. And for us, Mayfiend is known for both the quality and the name.
Exactly.
And another thing I wanted to mention, Lamb, and what Lamb said that I think was amazing. For those of you who know the Black Willy Wonka. Now, Lamb said, people follow people and people follow trends.
Right.
And this is such a great statement, and it's very true because you reference using influencers as marketing. And the reason that's so useful, so successful, is because they are people who are easy to follow. You're literally following them on social media.
Want to follow.
And then they are creating trends. And people follow trends. You got to understand, it's like the current in Finding Nemo. Just hop in and ride the wave. Everybody wants to bandwagon. Might as well use it to your advantage.
And I could be saying this the wrong way, but I remember him saying something along the lines of fashion is for a moment, but style is forever. Like what's considered cool and what's considered fashionable may be that for like 5 years. And nowadays it's probably even shorter than that. But you having some type of style about yourself lasts forever. So when you're thinking about these products and why they have such a high demand and whatnot, even when they may not have a large supply of things, it's because of, like you said, Jose, they have quality. Lamborghini are making some of the fastest cars on the planet. And their cars look like fucking spaceships. They look cool as fuck. So they're able to do certain things that other brands may not because the quality is not there. Like the quality and look and aesthetic of a fucking Honda, a regular Honda, let's say a Honda Civic. Shout out Honda though. We're not just shitting on Honda because we know we had Hondas.
Yeah, Honda's cool.
Say like a Honda Civic or whatnot. The demand is not going to be there for that as much as a Lamborghini, I would say, from a certain market. And that's actually another thing that we can touch on as well. On maybe not this podcast, but other podcasts, where a Honda Civic might be on this side of the bell curve because of a different reason than Lamborghini. They might be on the same height of the bell curve, just opposite ends. And there are opposite ends because people want them, but they want them for different reasons. So you have to know why people may want your product and who may want your product. Because people want Honda Civics because price, fuel efficient, and they do what people need them to do.
It's practical.
Longevity.
Yeah.
It's practical. You can have it for a long time and it's not going to have a whole bunch of technical issues, right? People want a Lamborghini over here because it's cool as fuck, it's fast as fuck, and everybody wants a Lamborghini. If they could all buy a Lamborghini, if they all had the money to do so, they would do so.
Lamborghini's for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lamborghini is for everybody who can afford it. So that's why they're both over here. They both have a large amount of people that want them, but for different reasons. So when you're thinking about your product and trying to increase the demand for it, you have to realize why people would want your product. It might be different than why people may want our product. Think about why people may want your product and then figure that out. Once you figure that out, utilize and kind of center your market strategy around whatever that is. Because if someone was trying to sell me a Honda Civic because it goes fucking 100 miles per hour instead of fucking 200 like a Lamborghini, and I'm looking for something fast, I'm not going to want that shit for that. I want something fast. So you have to realize that your thing is not speed. Your thing is not coolness. Your thing is not, having models and fucking famous people in your fucking vehicles. Your thing is practicality, fuel efficiency and longevity. So whatever that thing is for your product, find that, center your marketing around that, and then push it up that way.
Well said, my brother.
Appreciate you.
And with that, the AM Club Podcast.
Mic check. The AM Club Podcast.